dancing under me through. Love is all around the soul. Let's protect what he gave us and see the stars in the night, and they're beaming oh so bright, and the moon that guides us all when we take an evening stroll. As we lie in bed tonight, I pray that all will be alright. Soon the birds will start to sing, hope and joyfulness they bring. Ooh, love is all around the soul. Let's protect what he gave us. Da 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 da.
These are ordinary people that haven't been arrested before. None of us had been arrested before. I did then end up saying to my husband and my daughter that I might be in jail. For a mother to go to jail, that is what it's going to take to make a difference.
I got to shut off 590,000 barrels of tar sands filled with toxic chemicals. I knew that when I cut that chain and I opened that fence, that I was crossing a threshold that I couldn't uncross. I had made a choice to go into another part of my life and that I wasn't going to be able to step back from that.
There's enormous pressure on us because we cannot lose this case.
I have one last stab at this, and I am gonna try and take it with all my might.
Back confused, have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Back confused, have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
There's this moment when you have to step out of this threshold of your own comfort and take a risk. They bring this beast, this monster, into the beautiful Salish Sea, and we get to fight them with kayaks. And all of a sudden, we had this incredible battle where we were winning because we were winning the moral fight. The whole world was cheering for us. Once you join the battle, you're in the battle. You know, then you're in.
a good morning, time to go. Got that smile upon my face, 'cause there's excitement in the chase, this I know. Yeah, I'm going for the ride and find myself I am alive, and I soar. Still I run toward the wind and let the challenge draw me in, 'cause I want more. Oh, we are all looking for adventure. 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 Oh, wake up heart and wake up mind. See the world is yours to find, and with every passing day there's more, calling you out to explore. Get up and go. There is joy found in the race, and I feel it in the place where I'm free. And I simply can't deny it, that I feel adventure calling out to me. Yeah, we are all looking for adventure. 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 We are all looking for And I'm living free, living free, living free, and I was meant to be. Living free, living free, living free, and I was meant to be. I'm living free, living free, living free, and I was meant to be free. Meant to be free.
Ready?
Set.
Glow. Good afternoon, racers, and welcome to Power Relay, Race to a Better Reality. Thank you for once again joining us at Klimatotohanan, the fortnightly webcast of the Climate Reality Project Philippines. My name is Daniel Madriaga, or Danny, a Pinoy climate reality leader, coordinator of the Youth Cluster for the Climate Reality Project Philippines, and project co-lead for Race to a Better Reality. I am so excited to be with you here today for an episode that definitely embodies our webcast's name, Klimatotohanan, or Climate Truth, as we tackle head-on the just transition away from perhaps the most powerful threat to our human race, fossil fuel. Co-hosting with me today is none other than Chelsea Angeles, a fellow Pinoy climate reality leader. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, Danny, and a warm hello to everyone joining us from around the world today. My name is Chelsea Angeles, and I'm a philosophy major at the Ateneo de Manila University with minors in Spanish and literature. I'm a Pinoy climate reality leader as well, and a Better Normal youth champion, and I'm aspiring to be an environmental and human rights lawyer. And you know what, Danny, you're absolutely right. Today's episode is about climate truth and reality, as we are joined today by none other than the climate activists featured in Emmy Award filmmaker Joe Gantz's latest documentary, The Race to Save the World, now streaming in Southeast Asia at tinyurl.com/rtstwph, which will be flashed on the slide. And, I think that our esteemed guests today will be sharing their own Cuento Clima or climate stories. And together they are intergenerational responsibility come to life. Humans from different generations and different walks of life running in step towards a better reality for our planet and its people, especially for the youth.
This episode comes at the perfect time too, Chels. Last August 12th, we celebrated International Youth Day by premiering the Race to Save the World in Southeast Asia, the proceeds of which will be channeled to Race to a Better Reality, a project led by the youth for the youth. In this project, the Youth Cluster, in partnership with a grassroots organization here in the Philippines, Light of Hope PH, aims to raise enough funds to install solar panels at Panganan Elementary and High School, which is situated in an island community in Visayas vulnerable to flooding due to sea level rise. Solar panels would not only mean a clean source of energy for better lighting, ventilation, communication, and overall quality of education for its students, it would also mean a more reliable source of electricity, which is crucial in emergencies. Climate action is a bid for survival, but it's also a chance to manifest a better reality for all of us, to build the world we want to live in.
Truly, Danny, we need a just transition of not only our energy system, but our entire system. And you know what? August is also National Electrification Awareness Month in the Philippines. 93% of Filipino households now have access to electricity. However, the 7% is equivalent to 1.62 million Filipino households without access. And of those connected to the grid, some are more electrified than others, as power disruptions vary from nearly zero in the national capital region to over 100 in some provinces. And we're all paying power rates that are among the highest in Asia. Thankfully, renewable energy offers a beacon to our energy trilemma.
All this talk of electrification, Chels, I'm ecstatic to meet our guests. In this episode, we'll be putting a spotlight on their experiences and insights on fighting against fossil fuels, the just transition to renewable energy, and of course, intergenerational responsibility.
I know, Danny, I'm powered up. But before we begin, we'd like to remind our viewers on Facebook that you may receive a certificate for tuning in to this Klimatotohanan episode. First, comment your name on the Facebook post of this live stream. You can also add a shout out or a message like, "Hi, I'm Chelsea Angeles watching from Cebu City." And then you just have to answer the feedback form after the episode, the link of which you can find on the Facebook post of the live stream as well.
All right, Chelsea, that sounds great. Now let's run with it. But first off, a little warm-up question for our guests. Where are we now in our race to save the world? And what does the finish line look like to you? And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Abby Brockway. Abby Brockway and her family live in the Pacific Northwest, where they have enjoyed the beauty of their environment, from the mountains to the sea. When Abby became aware that the fossil fuel industry was planning to use West Coast ports like Seattle and Portland to export oil, coal, and gas, she joined forces with other environmental groups to prevent over 20 fossil fuel projects from being approved. In the summer of 2014, an oil train derailed 1 mile from her daughter's school, inspiring Abby to join with others to block a mile-long oil train from traveling through Washington cities and towns. She and 4 others were arrested and stood trial, taking the case up to the Washington State Supreme Court, arguing that their act of civil disobedience was necessary to prevent greater harm to her family and the people in her community. Fellow humans, let's welcome the Wonder Woman of our panel, Abby Brockway. Hi, Abby. How are you?
Fine. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for being with us here today. We're so excited. To start our warm-up, where are we now in our race to save the world, and what does the finish line look like to you?
You know, with this IPCC report, even though we knew that it was going to be really a challenging report to read, it seems that I know locally with COVID keeping us stuck in our homes, and then this report coming out and kind of feeling a little bit like we're ready to do some things creatively, I feel more motivated to start doing things that would kind of outwardly express what a lot of us are worrying about, instead of sitting around worrying, trying to do some more things. But it is challenging to stay hopeful in when we know time is running out.
That's really great, Abby, and I'm so happy that I'm so excited to hear from you more on that later. So thank you and welcome to the show. We're on, I mean, to this episode, and we're honestly so excited to hear from you. All right, so with that, next up, let's introduce our next speaker, Bill Moyer. Now, Bill Moyer is a fourth generation Washingtonian living with his wife and daughter in the woods of Vashon Island near Seattle. He is the executive director and co-founder of the creative activism organization Backbone Campaign. Founded in 2003, Backbone has been an innovative force for developing and spreading artful activism practices such as kayaktivism, light projection, innovative bannering, and other creative tactics. To augment its opposition to the use of the Pacific Northwest as a fossil fuel corridor to Asia, Backbone began a strategic propositional campaign to advance a positive vision for U.S. rail. Bill and the team co-authored the 2016 book Solutionary Rail, a people-powered campaign to electrify U.S. railroads and open corridors to a clean energy future. Bill is increasingly focused on this work and directing this campaign. Yippee kayak, Bill, welcome to the show. All right, so we have the same, warm-up question for you. Where are we now in our race to save the world, and what does the finish line look like to you?
Well, where are we? It seems like we're at a precipice of a moment of truth, but it seems like we continually are at that. And so, to me, there's no time really to despair, though, and we owe it to our children and our ancestors and our future generations to make a difference, to do everything we possibly can at this moment. And we are the positive thing is that you and I are talking to each other, that all of us are together, that because this has to be a global movement, and it's more about just the right policies or even simply electrifying everything. It's really, I think, about how we act on the planet and what we value. And it seems to me that as we find the most despairing news, we can also see the most beautiful blooming of movements and of communities. Specifically, I feel like in the Pacific Northwest, but also across this country, but also around the globe, Indigenous leadership is forefront. And I think that Indigenous values are fundamental to challenging the extractive and shifting away from the extractive paradigm that we've lived in for the last hundreds of years. And I think so. I think we have both the very worst and we have the very best examples. And I feel like we're seeing that leadership, and we should be doing our best to follow that leadership. Winning, to me, the victory line for the race has to be a full transformation of how our relationship with each other and the planet, and that no one is that we're all in this together. That has to be our fundamental organizing principle, and I think it has to be the fundamental organizing principle of our governments and our societies and our economies. And if we don't have that, we're not gonna win this race. I don't think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Bill. And we're so excited to hear more from you later. I definitely agree. When we're talking about the system, it's not just the energy system, it's our value system as well. So thanks for that. And now we move on to our third guest for today. Very excited to be having Michael Foster with us. Michael Foster grew up surrounded by oil refineries near the Houston Ship Channel. As a high school freshman on the debate team during the 70s energy crisis and oil embargoes, he studied energy independence and found out that we only had a few years to begin to wean off fossil fuels in the 80s or risk the rapid end of civilization and mass death in his lifetime. With a master's in education and counseling psychology from the University of Louisville, he strove to integrate carbon counseling in his work with his clients. In addition to private practice, he also counseled youth on treks in the Oregon High Desert, the Cascades, and the Olympic Coast. As a father of two, he became an activist and volunteered to bring the European Children's Initiative Plant for the Planet into North America. He co-founded 350 Seattle, shared Al Gore-style climate talks for thousands, and paddled with hundreds of kayaktivists against an oil rig illegally docked in Seattle before it headed north to drill the Arctic. He coordinated the youth and families of the lawsuit Foster v. Ecology, working with our Children's Trust, who sued the state of Washington and won, the first time a U.S. court directed the government to fix climate. Ladies and gents, it is truly my honor to welcome Michael Foster. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm glad to see you.
Great. We have the same question. Where are we now in our race, and what's the finish line look like to you?
So I believe it was in 2013 that I heard Representative Yeb Sanyo speak to the United Nations from the Philippines 4 days after Cyclone Haiyan had hit the Philippines, and his brother was missing. And he began fasting, and he said he would eat again once the talks had produced some kind of meaningful progress toward climate action. And people around the world began fasting with Representative Sanyo from the Philippines, and I fasted for 11 days without food, and there was no progress that year during the United Nations climate talks. It was the second year in a row that the talks began a week after a major typhoon, one of the largest ever, had hit the Philippines. 2 years in a row. So the answer about where are we? We're 20 years too late. Period, the end. If you don't believe me, ask Greta. If you don't believe me, ask the Chinese. Confucius say, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, because you need a tree. And we need 1.2 trillion trees, more than we have, the number that we've cut down in the last century during my lifetime. And there are 1/3 as many living creatures on the face of the planet as there were when I started school. We're too late. So despair all you want and do it anyway. Whatever it is that you need to do it anyway. Because, yes, Bill Moyer reminding me, the next best time to plant a tree is today. At this point, Greta's been very clear. It's not about hope. Hope appears when there is action. Without action, when you're in a burning house, it's not about whether you're hopeful. It's about whether you're moving.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Michael. Thank you for shedding some light on the bleak reality that we're all facing. But like you said, like, even though we are 20 years too late, what choice do we have, right? So we need to act now wherever we are now in this race. So thank you for sharing that. And I can't wait to hear more from you later. All right, so with that, let's introduce our next speaker, who is the embodiment of the youth's capability, creativity, and energy to lead. Aji Piper grew up in the woods of the Kitsap Peninsula in Washington, where his mother raised him in connection with Buddhism and herbalism, leading him to develop a deep love and connection to the forest and waters of the Pacific Northwest, and with an awareness of environmental issues. His journey in activism began when he learned about oil trains coming through his city and along the coast, driving him to participate in protests and legislative hearings. He and several of his peers were plaintiffs in the Foster v. Ecology case, where they took the Washington Department of Ecology to court to demand they use current science and act to mitigate climate change, and won. Aji is also one of 21 youth plaintiffs who have been suing the United States government for over 5 years in a Landmark U.S. federal climate lawsuit. And on top of all that, he and his brother Adonis are a sibling songwriter duo, playing their songs on his ukulele and mobilizations, raising the voice of the youth on environmental issues. We want to just transition. We're not asking for permission, are we, Aji? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hi, Aji. So we have the same warm-up question for you. Where are we now in our race to save the world? And what does the finish line look like to you?
Yeah, that's a hard one that I've been thinking about. I think as early as a couple years ago, I've been thinking about how, like, despite the fact that I'm involved in so many large projects, environmental projects, things like these different lawsuits, and before the pandemic, going to a lot of public speaking, a lot of port commissioner meetings and other town hall things like that, speaking in front of Congress, even that, like, despite the fact that I was doing all of what we would consider these high profile activities, and I was out there, I was really trying to get the word out, get people to make change. There wasn't change happening fast enough, and it was like very clear that there was like very very slim chance as a world, as a like kind of cultural, that we were going to have that cultural shift around from, like Bill said, an extractive relationship with our planet, and move into a sustainable one. So I've been for a while just having a hard time, like, what do I, because we're dragging our feet as a I don't like to, normally I don't like to put it as bleakly as Michael put it, but yeah, no, we're like 20 years too late. Every metric of science is showing us that we're in the point where we don't have the choice to stay away from the dangerous effects of climate change. And then if we don't do anything drastic, we're going to hit the worst of them. Like, we're not going to get like the mid-range. We're just going to go all the way up to the top. And so I think right now, a lot of people have described over the years climate change as a marathon instead of like a sprint. So instead of something that happens like very quickly, especially like when I started climate change, people who are older were like, don't get burned out quick, because this is a marathon, it's a long race. Well, at this point, it's a marathon, and we're closer to the start than we are to the finish of the race. And I think the end of this race looks like just closing it out. Like, there's no real, just don't let us not delude ourselves with this idea that if we do everything we can, we're going to miraculously escape these dangerous effects that are coming. That we've made our bed, we have to lay in it. This shit's coming down the pipeline, in my language, but that doesn't mean that we can't finish. That doesn't mean we have to give up halfway, and we can at least close out the race. So I think that's the important takeaway on my side, when we've laid bare the reality of the climate, is that there is not like a easy happy ending for this right now. It's never going to happen, but there's at least the pragmatic one where we do the right thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for putting a spotlight on that, Aji. I think for the United States, as well as for the Philippines, in the polls or in the surveys, majority of the population don't deny the climate crisis anymore. So the problem becomes less of climate denial and more of climate delay. So we all recognize this is an issue, but what are we really doing to address it? All right, so thank you everyone. Already a great discussion. We're only in the introduction. So, all right, racers, to your marks. We're about to start the first segment of the race, which is about precisely that, starting. So Aji took us right there. The truth and reality of the climate crisis are undeniable. And every day, more and more people are keen on joining the race. However, the climate movement can be overwhelming or intimidating for someone who's just about to start. So our first question for our guests is, how did you first get involved in the climate movement? What were your first climate actions? And did you have a springboard or a tipping point at which you felt you had to do more to elevate or amplify your climate action? So once again, we can start with Abby and then move down the line. Take it away, Abby.
Well, I actually feel like I was a very unlikely activist when I started, meaning that a lot of the groups that I ended up with were grandmothers and grandfathers who felt like they already lived their life and their kids were busy raising their grandchildren. And so they were taking up the reins of doing the work because they had the free time and they were doing it in honor of their children. And me as a mother, I didn't see as many people in the spaces that I was in at the time that I joined, although I must say that it's changed since then. But I worked with a lot of college students who also were going to school and working hard and just had a lot of energy and ideas. And so I actually signed an online petition that said, would you be willing to risk arrest to prevent the Keystone Pipeline, which is the pipeline that goes from Canada to Texas, this huge pipeline that had been being constructed in segments. And so I signed that and was introduced to people. They said, oh, come meet us in Seattle. We're going to kind of have this group. And I didn't know, but it was a group called Training the Trainers. So whoever signed that petition was invited to become trainers to train other people. And I knew nothing at that point, but little did I know that everybody that was in the room already knew each other and they were very active in the movement. And they actually were involved in the WTO protests in Seattle, and they had a lot of history of organizing. And I couldn't believe how open and helpful and how they shared their skills, and they invited you to do things you maybe weren't comfortable with doing. But I have to say that after that, along the way, I met Bill Moyer at his, he had this action camp. It was like an activist camp where you go and you camp with the community and you learn more skills and kind of learn kind of the history of how changes have been made. And so I started knowing no one. And by the end, now most of my friends, I have to say, are in the movement. So I've just really expanded my friends level quite a bit.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Abby. It's interesting to hear how you said you started as an unlikely activist. You knew no one, but now you become so involved in this and how active you are. And honestly, that's really inspiring, especially to those who just want to start the race as well. So thank you for that. All right. So I also remember how in the film you said, I believe we can change things, and this is a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket. Honestly, I got goosebumps. But when all those drops fill the bucket up, that'll be a good thing. So truly, even if it feels like just a tiny drop, if we all just start, then we can all make it closer to the finish line together. All right. So Bill, the film also showed that when you got together, your wife hadn't known this whole activist side of you. So how did you first get into all of this, and how did it lead to K-activism and all the work that you do with Backbone?
Well, my first protest when I was like 12 years old. So if we're maybe 13 years old, and we were protesting the babies, the killing of baby seals in the Arctic. And so, but it's not so much like, my dad worked for different tribes around the Pacific Northwest. And I think that was also my first experience of indigenous leadership and values and the value of community. I had lots of different branches and of studying political science and doing all that stuff. But, at a certain point, like I was just doing music and I was playing in projects and I'm a percussionist, and a bunch of friends of mine were like, made giant puppets and did what we call festival arts. And my wife's an aerialist, and after after 9/11, we were so fed up with the direction that the U.S. was going, that a group of us just got together, some just friends that did other stuff. We weren't activists necessarily. And we started having monthly potlucks and just bringing food together and being together and saying, well, what could we do? And so that that was the genesis of the Backbone campaign. And so I think it's really powerful to come together with friends and the people you know and love and trust, and have it make those really, like I said before, ask, well, what the question, wouldn't it be, or see what people say when you say, wouldn't it be beautiful if we, and then jam on the answer to that question. But so there's the power of friends, and that was a big part of the start of the Backbone campaign. But another pivot the Backbone campaign is, we started as, like I said, as an anti-war group, as a pro, talking about national and global issues. Well, what I feel like I learned over time is that our actions on national and global issues we were able to deliver victories when those issues are often about the corporate and elected power colluding and screwing up something, right? So they're screwing up in the big ways, but they're also screwing up in lots of little ways. And they're screwing up in lots of little ways that affect our own communities. So what happened with Shell No, for instance, is it was a bridge between our love for this place that we lived and this hard to touch, hard to intangible thing called global warming and even Arctic drilling. So I believe that we can fight the impacts of the collusion between corporate and elected power, where people's lives are directly impacted, and so and build power and deliver victories. So I think it's really important to win. And you don't win, it's like writing a movie. You don't do a feature film before you've done a YouTube documentary, right? Or a YouTube whatever. So building from a place of victory and delivering victories for your communities in ways around things that make a tangible difference to their lives, around things that they love and the people that they love. You can connect the dots between that and climate. And I think that's gives people, you give the opportunity to practice winning, because we really need to start getting really good at winning, and it's more fun.
Definitely more fun to win. I am myself, actually, our Pinoy climate reality leaders are all pretty competitive. We love to win, so we can relate on that note. But what you said also about getting together with your friends, here also in the local scene, a lot of the youth organizations in the climate space, 1 Million Lights PH, For the Future Philippines, they were groups of friends who had a shared experience, talked about it, got together and thought, what can we do to help? What can we do to take this to the community levels? Absolutely. Sometimes we get so caught up with the idea of convincing other people, that we forget that we have what we need sometimes right here in front of us or in the space around us. So thanks for sharing that, Bill. Yep. And I gotta say that your abounding hope is invigorating. In the film, you talked about stepping out of your comfort zone, but that, once you join the battle, you're in. We're in this fight, whether we want to be or not. The climate crisis is an existential threat to all life, and we should rightfully fear it and allow that to spur us to action. And I remember something that Aji and Michael said a while ago, that sometimes it's hard to feel hopeful, in such bleak times, but I forget the climate activist who said this. I think it was May Hagler. Maybe hope doesn't come for action. Maybe courage comes first, and then action, and then hope follows. So thanks to everyone for bringing that up. Anyway, more than fear, what moves us also is hope and love for our planet. Two things that Bill is definitely filled with. A doomed planet might not be motivating to fight for, but when you think of it like joining a race, a marathon, maybe a nearly impossible one, but one that we can still win, I'd take that challenge any day, especially with a team. Now, Michael.
I'm sorry, I just have to say, I love that you started the show with Ready, Set, Glow. I mean, maybe but didn't you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is just like, to go with that, it's like doom and bloom. Like, now is the time to bloom, folks. Like,
That's the glow up. It's time to glow up, you know?
Yeah.
Bloom, no, BL like a flower.
Definitely. Yeah. We're gonna ask your permission, Bill, to use that in some of our campaigns. I love it. Let doom give rise to bloom. Anyway, Michael, you've organized numerous teams, many including and centering the youth from court cases to your work with 350 Seattle, perhaps all leading to that turning point at Keystone. How did it all start, and what changed, or what did you realize that pushed you to act with the urgency that you have now and you've had for quite some time, actually?
Climate Reality Project. I started, my first activism was going to the Climate Reality Project training in San Francisco in 2012. And until then, everything I had done was just being a green consumer, trying to talk to neighbors, you know, kind of living the lifestyle and you know, clicking on petitions online. And the Climate Reality Project training gave me the tools to put together slideshows for any audience. And so I started in my kids' school classrooms and honestly, doing 5 science classrooms a day, day after day after day, and looking at these kids' faces and realizing that, you know, they're not even being taught this in school. And it doesn't matter what grade you're in, you're not learning this stuff, and the grown-ups are not doing anything about it. And everything that they're trying to do is being shot down. And the kids are the ones who have powerful voices. So just going through that Climate Reality Project training gave me all the tools that I needed to go out into the community and meet all of these wonderful people and organizations doing stuff I've never heard of, and to start organizing with young people and helping young people through Plant for the Planet and other organizations like I Matter and Our Children's Trust, helping young people find their power, because I believe that one young person's voice is worth 50 of mine, simply because you're going to be here. This is your century, and we're not taking care of this place for you. So apologizing to young people in classrooms day after day forced me to do more.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Michael. It's honestly encouraging to see how Climate Reality helped you jumpstart your journey into climate activism and how you're able to mesh it with your work in the classroom. And I think you kind of touched on already intergenerational responsibility, which we'll be discussing a little bit more later, but that's really great and inspiring to other climate reality leaders who want to become more active, and also hopefully to those who will join the training, which will be happening soon. I mean, the signups are open. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. Yeah, that's really great. All right, so we really are in a race against time to reach the right side of the finish line, or as Michael put it in the film, to stand on the right side of history. All right, Aji, we also have the same question for you. As far as histories go, we can say that the youth like yourself and myself are only at the beginning of ours, at least personally. Yet kids these days suddenly find themselves at the crossroads of human history. How is it like being in the middle of this movement, and how did you join it in the first place?
So my introduction to climate change was pretty simple. I don't think it's a very complex one. Just, you know, the most basic time I heard about it was ice caps melting back in 2007 or something like that, maybe 2009. And just I remember listening to that on the radio and being like, well, that's a problem. And knowing that we were polluting our world. I think before that, the thing I was concerned about was plastic pollution, because, you know, it's a large problem. You can go anywhere pretty much in the United States and find just excessive amounts of plastic pollution on the ground or in the water. And you can, you know, there's a huge amount of plastic pollution in our oceans. And so, like, just already being concerned about an environmental problem is just an easy segue into climate change. And I think the only reason I wasn't engaged in it earlier was just geographical circumstances, and then like a lack of community for it. So the moment I got into Seattle, and found the community for it, kind of launched me straight into climate action. Yeah, that was this short and simple. And I think it also speaks to, like, it doesn't have to be super complex. It didn't take me some Herculean feat to become a climate activist. It was just kind of being concerned and finding the community, and bam, I was in.
Absolutely. Likewise, for Aji and Michael, before I joined Climate Reality also, so Climate Reality is my main community and climate family. I was just a passive green consumer, but once you do find your people, it really spurs you into action. It's so much easier to know the pathways that you can engage in, know how you can help, particularly in whatever community or sector you're in. So yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing that up, Aji. And yes, this really is the fight of our generation for our generation and the generations to come. But to win it, we need the generations before us to be with us. So thanks again to everyone. Aji, your passion for the environment really inspires all of us. I remember reading that you had to drop out of high school to focus on the case. So that was, to read that it just blew my mind.
It's like a couple things were happening with me, right? I was traveling a lot for the lawsuit, and I was spending a lot more time engaged in environmental direct action, whether it was speaking to Congress, whether it was missing school to speak to City Hall, or just because I was like literally in court, a state south of where I was in Eugene, Oregon, or I was in Seattle, but like down, I was in court in Eugene, Oregon, or whatever. And it was just, I missed enough time off school that my grades were slipping. And so it was a conscious decision of like, I can't juggle these two things. And while climate is a pressing issue that happens right now, the truth is that education is something you can gain at any age. And I still have time to graduate high school. So like the plan was never to like not graduate high school. I was just like, I just have to like, I can't be in high school at this moment, and I'd rather drop out than fail the high school, right? I'd rather not take like a failure on my transcript and just drop out, come back to it. So it was like this awkward moment, and it's hard to like explain that to people, like when the news only has like so much to report. So like the headline hits like high school dropout to be a climate activist. I'm like, no, it's a little more nuanced than that. But yeah, I mean, essentially, I was willing to make that choice, because I could have chosen one way or the other. I could have chosen like to continue in high school and kind of drop my climate work, or to continue my climate work and drop out of high school. And I felt that the climate work was the more important choice, so I chose that. I did graduate high school. So
great to hear, Aji. And absolutely, it's unbelievable to me that some news painted it as high school dropout becomes a climate activist. When I did read the article, I did get the impression that you made the conscious decision to drop out to really focus on the climate fight, and it just goes to show the sacrifices that some of us are willing to make, particularly the youth. Like, it's not just our future that's being robbed from us, it's our present. There are things that we should be able to enjoy in our time that we have to delay or put aside or sacrifice to fight for the entire planet, basically. So big respect to you, Aji, for making that decision. That's incredible and very inspiring. All right, first leg of the race done. How are we feeling, Chelsea?
You know what, Danny? I'm pretty pumped. First leg has given me a lot of energy to go on. And with that, let's now proceed to the second leg of our race, which, as it turns out, is really a marathon with obstacles. So our first question in the segment is, what is the biggest hurdle you went through in your climate activism? All right, Abby, will you get the ball rolling in this question? Please feel free to share.
Well, you probably saw it in the film, and that when I went to trial, I really had a mental breakdown and was not able to say the things that I wanted to say. One of the things that's so interesting is, first of all, so I'd been in the movement and learned about supporting actions and like doing all the other roles. And so I stepped into being more on the front line of the action, and it got a lot more attention than I ever thought it would. And you realize that you don't have gifts in all areas. And so like being the spokesperson in this action, sometimes my whole self could show up, and other times anxiety got to me and I wasn't able to be the spokesperson that I wished I could have been. And during the trial, I just broke down. Luckily that, I wasn't the only one. It was the Delta 5. So there were 4 others that did a great job on trial and speaking. But I really felt the pressure of, first of all, the honor of being like the person that was able to speak, but then feeling like I really let the team down by not being able to say what I wanted to say. I did want to share one thing about the trial is, there was a bunch of evidence that was admitted into the trial. And one of them was this, what they took from the scene was this like bear claw. And it's like, it looks like an arm cast, and you actually lock your arms in it to buy time, so that like if I were to be pulled from the top of the tripod, that I could, if they were going to get me really quick, I could stay there a little bit longer. And I ended up not using the piece of equipment, but it did get taken into evidence, and the jury was going to see it, and it looks really like mean, and people are like, what is this contraption? And the prosecutors were going to submit it in, and they showed this photo of it. And I argued with them and I said, I don't want the photo. If you're going to submit this piece of evidence, I want you to give the whole big, huge cast, this arm thing on it, because I had 2 messages on it. One was a message from my daughter telling me that I was a good mother and how much she loved me. And the other one so the jurors were going to see this. And the other one was a message about Yeb Sanu, because he was the climate negotiator of the Philippines during the talks that Michael talked about. But when Typhoon Haiyan happened just less than a year before that, it was really on our minds. And Michael did fast during that. But that connection of that climate negotiator and the bravery of Yeb Sanu was huge for me. And so I wanted that message to be on that, for that interconnectedness, that bravery, and that power to stand up and do something risky. And so I just feel that connection with you all, and know that you never know who's going to, who you're going to inspire, so I just, I felt sometimes when you can't speak, others can speak for you, or there's messages that can be left that are able to be that voice. So I think that was kind of, in a long way, explains my struggle.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Abby, and thank you again for touching on Haiyan. Sadly, these really strong typhoons have become nearly commonplace here, and not been desensitized, but it is something that we have to deal with on a constant basis. And these big typhoons with big destructions make it to international news, but it's something that happens year after year. And unless we do something about the climate, these communities will continue to suffer. So thank you for bringing that up. And I just wanted to say that while it was a struggle, you closed, at least in the film, you said something that was really powerful. I just wanted to echo it again here. You said, before I switched to direct action, I actually felt like I tried to work within a system to the fullest extent possible. And it was very symbolic that we chose to trespass, because I felt like the railroad and the oil, they were trespassing against us. That was so powerful, and I'm really excited. It's a little spoiler for everyone watching this episode, but I hope it encourages you to watch the film. It was some really great content on there. All right. So Bill, rover to you. What was the biggest hurdle you went through in your climate activism?
That's a really interesting and kind of hard question. I would say that the biggest challenge is to sustain personally and with my family. I think that also that, you know, there's a lot of hurt and pain in the world and a lot of trauma, and it can come back to bite you. And so the movement spaces are not always the most friendly spaces, and that's hard. That's why I think a community-based work is so important, because in community-based work you're less vulnerable to the and people are accountable to each other. So I really respect that community-based work, and I'm more focused on that. I also think that you know, as you have more successes, there are things that you become more of a target. But then personally, I just like I don't want to treat myself like an extracted resource. You know, I can't stay up all night out there. You know, I need to be home with my family. I need to grow my garden. I need to take walks in places that I love on the beach, or I need to go on the water. I need to exercise. I need to eat good food. What all those things, I have to be with the people I love. I have to get around the fire and sing songs with my friends, and luckily I have a community that's really holds me, and a family, and chosen family, if you will. And that's and I think I had to pivot at a certain point when I was because it's easy to get obsessed with everything and figure out and feel like that, oh, all of these other things can wait. Well, I don't think they really can wait. And honestly, I think that's part of the system that we've internalized, that we treat ourselves and other people and like extractive resources or means to ends, rather than in relationship with those people and the places we love and ourselves. And so to me, I've been doing I have a different position in this, and I feel like almost embarrassed sometimes because it's become my job. So whereas I look at all of these folks who are like heroes, and I actually remember, Aji, I actually dropped out of college to be an activist. But it was like, for me, it was like, and I heard a friend tell me later on, like, show, don't tell. You know, we have to kind of create the spaces that we're going to be joyful and are going to be life sustaining in our communities, regardless of what everybody else does. And if I think that's it's like when the river is going down this canyon, we need to like drop, and it's too fast, the river, we need to slow the river down, right? We need to slow ourselves down. We need to take the little economies of our communities and decolonize them. Plug the leaks of equity and energy that are going away, the leaks of imagination that are swept up in watching TV. Anyway, like, I had to do that. I had to relook at my family as my source of strength and a source of courage, if you will. And so it's a really tricky balance. But I think if you're communication and looking to the people you love and showing up for those people and doing things together, because none of us have all the tools that we need to get there to the end of this race. And we really need each other. We're all in this together. If we don't do it that way, we're screwed.
Thank you for that, Bill. Honestly, like, when you say the biggest challenge is to sustain, I think everyone here can probably relate to that in their own journeys as well. And I think it also really goes to show the need for improving our endurance, you know, in this race, and how we really need to improve our cardio in this important race. And it's interesting to see like how improving our endurance allows us to endure, which not only means to last, not only can be used in terms of stamina, but also to actually to exist. Like, to endure means to exist, and that goes to show how we're trying to sustain ourselves in this race, to sustain our actual, like, our lives. So it's great to see how you jumped through that hurdle and how community-based work helped you with that, and how you're able to find a balance, because as you said, we can't wait, we can't just put it off. So it's great to see how you're able to overcome that. So thank you. And I think everyone can take inspiration from that. All right. So, Michael, let's hear from you. What was the biggest hurdle that you went through in your climate activism?
Very simply, family. I was not an activist when I started my family. And when I became an activist and had some success, and there was so much to be done, I said yes to everything. And so I was running around like crazy, and I changed faster than my family was ready for me to change. And so it's not in the film very much because it's my family's story to tell. It is not mine, but they needed to eject me from the island. So I can agree now publicly with Bill and everything he's been saying, that everything we do in relationship. I believe we move like a school of fish, and there is no leader in a school. It's about proximity. And that's how we evade predators and make our cultures. So I'm sad to say that family was the hardest thing, and I haven't recovered yet. So definitely stay close. Yeah, that's part of the intergenerational challenge, is that older people are responsible, older people have power and are making the decisions, and young people don't even get a vote. So I'm also a big proponent. If I had time, please, somebody start the campaign to give children the vote around the world. Everybody who's a citizen needs a vote. And even if mom or dad has to cast the ballot for you, now in the 21st century, more than ever, every young person needs somebody voting for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that deeply personal hurdle, Michael. And I guess, again, going back to what Bill said in the film, once you're in the battle, you're in. And there are things that once you learn them or once you see or hear about them, it's nearly impossible to close your eyes or to just ignore it. And you have to go into it with all of that you are. And some things, unfortunately or sadly, get sacrificed. And that's the issue with this entire problem that we're trying to solve. If not all of us pitch in, all of us are going to pitch in more than we should. So that's why it needs to be all of us again working together. Aji, we now pass on the mic to you. What is the biggest hurdle that you faced in this race?
Yeah, I would say the biggest hurdle that I faced is similar probably to a lot of other people's, just personal burnout. Being like when I started like 12 years old, and the unique position where, despite the fact we were late to the pickup on climate change, the government in the U.S. had already been talking about it for quite some time. We already had like air quality and climate emission recommendations that we were not following. We were just like, screw those are out the window essentially. But like in like 2013, we still had the opportunity where, if we as a country and as a world had taken some, not even necessarily drastic, but just aggressive measures, we would be so far from where we are today. We would be in a place where we would less feel the urgency of the disaster of climate change coming down upon us, and be more focused on how to streamline our new efficient systems that we've set up to avoid that disaster that is now coming on us. And then through the years of being a climate activist and knowing, right, like when I started with the Plant for the Planet here in Seattle, the slideshow that I saw that was presented to me, one of the big slides was a graph pulled directly from a body of work that was worked on by James Hansen and a bunch of his colleagues, that was later updated by one of his colleagues, Pushkar Kurecha, that showed an average of where we would end up. It's like 4 lines. And it's like, if we start right now, and it shows the curve of like, we go up a bit and then we go back down in terms of atmospheric carbon dioxide, and we get down to under 350 parts per million, like way under actually, by the end of the century. And then it was like, and if we wait until like 2020, there was like a 2013, there was like a today, there was like a 2016, there was like a 2020 and a 2025. And the 2021 was like, oh, you're not going to get back down under 350 parts per million till well after the century is gone. And that's it was updated, it was changed. The averages, I think they dropped a little bit. So like right now, if we were to take the most drastic action possible, we would just barely get under 350 parts per million by the end of 2100. And so that was the hard part for me, was knowing the science there, knowing what's, like what we're working against, the time clock that we actually have. It's not this, like back in 2013, it wasn't a 10-year time clock. There was no like, oh, at 2023, there was no like, oh, we'll get to 50% reductions by 2025. It was like, no, we need to be having like an aggressive amount every year starting 2013, 2014. And like having that weigh on my mind, like made it so the emotional side of like pouring all this energy and this time into trying to get adults to listen to me, and this paradox, this oxymoron of like being a youth that is more listened to and at the same time disregarded, like simultaneously, right? While my words had more weight on people's minds and consciousness, I didn't have a legal vote and I wasn't a legal constituent. So, I had no political sway, despite the fact that I was speaking from a strong moral standpoint, and from a standpoint of like, this is my future and this is something that you do need to consider, and that would be a benefit for all of us, honestly. And that was the hard, it made those emotional like lows like even lower. It made those like really hard to pull out of. And it felt like swimming up against a river, but the burnout was the hardest hurdle, something that really put a big damper on my enthusiasm. But
yeah, thank you, Aji, for that. I honestly, it's sad to see how, because of the lack of action, and especially from our lawmakers, even at 12 years old, you began to experience that burnout and to have that weight on your shoulders, which is honestly incredibly unfair, especially as a member of the youth. And like you said, you had hard science and information to back it. Oh, your dog is so cute. Sorry. You're speaking the truth, and it's really unfair that especially people in power are not listening to you and adults aren't listening to you. But that's incredible also to see how you're able to overcome that burnout. Well, or like continue to fight that against that burnout, and have that spark that keeps you going. So thank you for sharing that hurdle, and I hope that other members of the youth especially can get inspiration from that. So thank you, and I love your dog. Okay. All right, so now with that, let's move on to the next question of this segment, which is what do you guys think is the biggest hurdle that we face as a society in this race to a better reality, powered by a just transition to renewable energy? All right, so let's start this off with Abby. Please feel free to share.
Michael, will you go first?
Go ahead. I'll go ahead. So the biggest hurdle that we face as a society, from my point of view, as a 14-year-old, I learned that an Exxon scientist had studied the climate and determined that we had 5 to 10 years to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. It was 10 years later before I believed that was true. So the 5 or 10 years that he said we had to begin, weaning ourselves off of fuels was when I heard Dr. Hansen in front of Congress, the head of NASA, describing the emergency we were in the 1980s. So, so the biggest problem we've had since then has been disinformation. The fossil fuel corporations, Exxon #1 among them, have made certain that we don't understand the problem and that we disagree about what the solutions will be. By the time we get around to actually writing important policies that will actually cut emissions and actually shut down pipelines and refineries, there's going to be so much disinformation that I'm afraid in the United States it's going to take a military action. We have plenty of guns though, so that's not going to be a problem. Everybody will be able to shoot something. And I'm so glad you're in the Philippines and not over here where everybody's armed to the teeth. Anyway, the second biggest problem is that we simply, the disinformation is huge. Our leaders won't tell us what the emergency is. They won't tell us the time frame for taking action to get out of this, like Aji was describing. We really need about 25% emission cuts this year and every year now, and those trillion trees. And people don't want to stop flying to Hawaii. So it's a huge thing about not knowing what the problem is, not knowing what the solutions are, and then actually getting something done in our democratic societies where all of our leaders are bought off by oil companies. So they won't do the right thing. So we have a huge job in front of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. The words of a term that Bill used in the film. It's an oligarchy, and yeah, they've known for years and have kept us in the dark for years. And governments all over the world have several have declared climate emergencies. But the unfortunate thing is the declaration didn't necessitate action. So. All right, it's a climate urgency. What now? What do we do, right? So definitely, thank you for bringing that up.
So when I was in prison, I did ask people not to write me unless they were going to tell me what they were doing about it. And I'm really excited that your project is bringing electricity to a school through solar panels. That is I mean, getting your fingers in the dirt, planting a tree, raising a garden, whatever it is, the physical thing of change is going to be absolutely necessary, or people will just sit around arguing for the next 50 years. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to cry, but thank you for saying that. We really appreciate it, and we feel very inspired to continue going with everything that we've heard from everyone today. Yes, so Abby, would you want to answer the question?
Sure. I struggle with how change is going to be made in the way that we need it to be made. And I just see the coronavirus crisis in the United States as such a interesting parallel to the Americans are so self-centered and wanting to be like, I have my freedoms, but we don't realize that we're interconnected. And so for someone to not acknowledge that they're in a community and the choices that they make actually can harm other people is something that's happening. And literally, I see the only way in America in this, like this me first type of an attitude, is that they have to either get sick themselves or they have to see someone that they love get sick. And there is this group that will not change no matter what. We cannot win their hearts and minds, but there is a large group that we can win hearts and minds. So I think that's just focusing on that part of it is all that we can do at this point. So knowing what's realistic and what your work is, and natural consequences are happening here. There's such unjust natural consequences that are also happening, which is heartbreaking. So I believe that just that fierce love and that focusing on that is really my hope for the new way of, our new energy and our way of making that change. Heck.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. It's definitely a challenge to get other people or to help win a lot of people's hearts and minds. But fortunately, and hopefully we'll get to more hearts and minds are being won, and I hope that we'll be able to continue doing that. And yeah, that's definitely a huge challenge we face. So thank you for that. Let's hear from Bill next. What do you think is the biggest hurdle that we face as a society in this race?
Well, stop creating other enemies. Stop recruiting enemies. I'm just so disheartened that that to hear Joe Biden talk about, instead of using climate as the thing to motivate and unify us, he has to go talk about China. Like, come on. Aren't we just stopped with one forever war that lasted your entire lifetime in a whole region. It was a total waste. It was exactly the wrong thing to do. It was vengeful and hateful, and it created separation. It wasted so many lives and so much energy, and we wasted time. When we precious needed. Talk about 20 years, that's when we should have planted that tree, right? So let's not start another more silliness. Like, that should not be our rallying cry for the future, is to find enemies. And whether and in the U.S. it can be, it's always about fear and the other people. And I'm sure that, in the Philippines, you have their analogies or analogous situations, right? So stop creating false enemies. That would be really a great first step. I think another step, and I don't know what's more important, but stop wasting time on that. And it seems like important and very challenging to do. But another challenge that we have more, I think, control over relates to our own imagination. And Diane de Prima was a poet laureate of San Francisco years ago, and I don't remember many poems at all. But there's one line that's really easy to remember. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. She said it 3 times. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. All other wars are subsumed in it. So all of the things that we have, all these outside forces that tell us that either we can't make a difference, or we need to do something to be valuable, or whatever, anything that's distracting us from our genius as people to shape beautiful communities and have beautiful lives, and stand up to tyranny and anything that. So our challenge is to push away the noise and find and ignite our own imaginations in community with others. And because only when we have a vision that is enrolling and is so beautiful that everybody wants to join that vision, are people going to see a way out of the rat race bullshit that is of capitalism and transnational, whatever. Let's not go into the academics of it, but really we need a pathway out of the dominant paradigm, and we need to be building making beautiful and visible the alternate paradigm. And that's where I think we get leadership from traditional communities and indigenous leadership in many places around the world. And we need to listen and let that ignite our imaginations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill. The tagline of one of the most popular books, film franchises in our generation is remember who the real enemy is, right? So there's one overarching enemy. We may be stepping on different soils, but we share one atmosphere, one climate, and everything that we do affects the other. And definitely, like you said about imagination, the stories that we tell ourselves matter, and it dictates what we believe, and what we believe dictates what we do. So thank you for that. Aji, take it away. You now have the floor. What is the biggest hurdle of society?
Yeah, so like my fellow panelists were answering, I was thinking about this,
and like I want to just talk about a couple things because a couple things come to mind. As I've become more of an adult, 18, 19, 20, whatever, started working, it just like once you start working and once you get into the broader society, it becomes clearer and clearer how much of a rat race it is, and how one of the hurdles that we face that is huge is just every aspect, or at least in the U.S., in my experience, every aspect of how we run our society. Every single one, regardless of what field you go into, unless period. Because the way we've structured our society and our infrastructures require a lot of people to maintain what most people would consider a normal standard of living, to be incredibly consumptive and super, super wasteful. And everybody's so used to that. Everybody's so used to that expectation that it's hard. It's really, really hard to get away from that. And it's really, really hard to show people that like what you think is like a cushy and normal life is very destructive and could be so much better, even if it feels like it's a little more work. And then at the same time, another face of that same hurdle is those kinds of societies don't just, and that paradigm is, Bill was saying, yeah, we all want our stuff, Michael said. But the paradigm, Bill was saying, the general consensus thought that we have, the way we view the world, while it's not, it's possible for one person to change it, we can't pretend like there aren't a few specifically privileged individuals that start companies and corporations that influence policy that helps shape our paradigms. Like the conservative thought process and logic in the U.S. is driven directly by policy. It's driven directly by intentionally created vacuums of education that leave people ignorant and belligerent. And like, I'm recalling like several times I've seen breakdowns on graphs, like what everybody else looks like. If we were a graph of $5 billion per, like just imagine like grid ruled math paper. And just an example in the US of like Jeff Bezos at $190 billion. And then there's like everybody below that. And there's only like 5 or 6 people in between that $190 billion and like the 1%, where the 1% starts, which is like 400 million or more. There's only, between actually that, there's like, 12 people or whatever. But it's like, it's a super, super small amount. Everybody else falls in this super teeny tiny category, like way at the bottom of the page, if not below it. And it's like, they are a hurdle because everything that they've done in their life has gotten them to the point where they are, and they are standing in a position of power above everybody, where they have to lead by an example. We don't it's, yeah. So that's a hurdle that I think there's a couple, and I think it boils down to like capitalism and the way that we consume things.
Wow. Yeah, honestly, yeah, thank you, Aji. It's so true what you said about how dangerous our comfort zone has become, and how misplaced the general priorities of society are, and how wanting stuff is more important than, you know, wanting to improve and the state of the world, and honestly to help save the world. And I don't know if you know from the Fight Club, which we can't talk about, but the movie, the quote, we were the byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. The things we own end up owning us. Like, we buy things we don't need, and that's something that the whole world that's like the mindset of the whole world, and that's become so dangerous to this, to our existence. So yeah, it's really terrible. And the fact that so many privileged individuals who are outnumbered by those who are affected by this crisis, who don't have as much of a position to, you know, improve. I mean, to, like, they don't really have as much of a say. It's really sad to see that privileged people aren't doing as much as they should. So thank you for that. And thank everyone so much for all your answers in this segment. Now, before we proceed with the final leg of the race, let's take a little pit stop, a little water break. Here are a few announcements. Danny?
Thanks, Chelsea. You see climate changing and injustice and inequality growing across the planet. You want to make a difference, to act on climate, to lead on climate? Learn how through the 2021 Climate Reality Leadership Training Program led by former U.S. Vice President Al Gore and a team of world-renowned scientists, activists, innovators, and more. This free training will be held on October 16th to 24th, upon the completion of which you'll be joining our core of climate reality leaders. Signups are open and space is filling up fast, so register now at tinyurl.com/climate-reality-training. For our Pinoy climate reality leaders, the last day to answer our training and needs assessment is on Tuesday, August 31. Again, the last day to answer our form is on Tuesday, August 31. This Tuesday, the branch has rolled out this form in order to know each of us Pinoy CRLs better and assess how they can support our various climate actions and build our capacities. Of course, individual responses will be kept confidential. The assessment was sent to your registered email addresses and will only take 10 to 15 minutes to answer, shorter than a Friends episode, so please do participate. Finally, the Youth Cluster is now running in the Race to a Better Reality, a project led by the youth for the youth. We are streaming the film in which our esteemed guests are featured, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Joe Gans, The Race to Save the World, until September 20 only. This uplifting film follows the passion and unwavering commitment of Abby, Bill, Michael, and Aji, among others, as they fight in the trenches against climate change, inspiring us to make our voices heard for a livable future. Through our ticket sales, we aim to raise enough funds to install solar panels in partnership with Light of Hope PH at Panganan Elementary and High School, which is situated in an island community in Visayas vulnerable to flooding due to sea level rise. Solar panels would not only mean a clean source of energy for better lighting, ventilation, communication, and an overall quality of education for its students, it would also mean a more reliable source of electricity, which is crucial in emergencies. You can get your tickets at tinyurl.com/rtstwph. Regular tickets grant you access to the film. Special access tickets are also inclusive of entry to Solar Rise, an after-party event we'll be having on September 4th, featuring messages from our activists here today, insights from Filipino climate leaders, games, breakout sessions to further discuss the film, raffle prizes, and more. We invite you to go the distance with us.
Thank you, Danny. And with that, let's move on to the last mile, the toughest mile. And in climbing, the ascent also feels and often is the steepest near the top. And it's at this point that we have to summon all our strength in order to power through to the summit or to the finish line. And because this race is a team effort, everyone has different roles to play in helping the team win the race. With that in mind, we'd like to frame this segment with the question, what is the role of parents, the older generation, and young people in ensuring that we win this race? From this episode's title, this is a power relay from one generation to another. Abby, as a mother yourself, what are your thoughts on this? What should parents like you or those in your generation keep in mind if they want to join the fight?
Let's see. One thing that I find interesting is to not typecast people. And so, for instance, my daughter, as she was younger, being the mom of a or the daughter of a climate mom, I really had to be careful about putting that on her so that she could find it on her own and make it her own, because there's always resistance to assuming a role for a certain person. And I've also found that in trying to inspire other parents, oftentimes you don't know who you inspire. So for instance, it's not necessarily a lateral situation. A lot of times I'll be inspired by someone of another generation. So for me, I think the key is to, I don't know, try to, I'm not really sure how to really inspire other people that are like me to do the work. But I think we all have a responsibility to do something, no matter how busy we think we are, or what our responsibilities are within society. Like, there's got to be work to be done. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abby. Just to echo what you said, if we don't make time now, we're gonna run out of it very, very soon. So thanks for saying that. Bill, what about you? The film touched on your role as a climate activist and as a father. What do you think is the role of older generations as well as young people? And what is your advice for parents like you who want to join the fight?
Well, that's a hard question. All your questions are so hard. I just got to bring my daughter to college for her first time this week. We moved into the dorm yesterday. So I think the first thing that came to my mind was one, that we have to not let our fears rule our children's lives, and not stifle their imaginations, and let them have the liberty to be the genius problem solvers that they have the capacity to be, and don't paralyze them with. And usually, I mean, it's a little different, right? With all of us activists, where like I'm trying not to like scare my daughter away from activism or whatever, but no, which is not going to happen, but to not force them into to not force people into something, allow people to be their genius as self, and to not let our fears impede their creativity, and then to love their brilliance, and celebrate their ideas, and talk less and listen more. Check. Show, don't tell. Last piece. Check. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. I think we can all learn from that. And I love what you said, let people be, like, allow them to be their genius, and, get them to harness what they're capable of. So thank you for that. That's great. That's great. It shows the role of, the older generation. What about you, Michael, in your final remarks to the judge, which gave me shivers when I watched that scene? You talked about how what we're doing is a slow bullet to the head of young citizens who have a constitutional right to life. So does the older generation have a responsibility over that bullet? And what role do older generations have in this race? And what should they keep in mind?
Older people don't have any idea what we've done. I am guilty. I belong in prison for life. Right? If there were any climate justice on Earth, I would get a death sentence. Period. The end. And I've been one of the good guys, at least in wealthy consumer America. But I've owned 12 gas cars in my lifetime, and I've flown to Hawaii a couple of times. That's why I wear this shirt, to remind me. So I am a super consumer. And I have created this emergency for life as we know it. Now I'm not calling it an emergency for life. I'm calling it the end of knowing. because it's basically sentient beings that are in danger here. So it's the end of knowing that I'm causing. So if there were any justice, that would be on me. If older people could understand, could take the time to learn just enough of the science to understand what it is that we've done and what it is that we're now causing, this, Roger Hallam calls it a murder project, then we would behave very differently towards our own families, towards our children and grandchildren immediately. And it would probably begin with a lot of weeping, and begging forgiveness that we know we don't deserve. So I don't know, that's my thing, but I'm an idiot on families and relationships. I gave up my my licensed counseling practice when I became an activist. And certainly when my family kicked me out, I learned that I knew nothing about maintaining a living planet and a family. So I would just say with the kids, I would say for young people, as angry as they may feel, I would encourage them not to turn against the older generation, because as we've been saying, we're only going to do this together. No one person or no one group is going to solve this, but to use your power, because we are wired to protect our young. And I just want to read a short poem by Gary Snyder called For the Children. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us. The steep climb of everything going up, up as we all go down. In the next century or the one beyond that, they say, are valleys, pastures where we can meet in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together, learn the flowers, go light.
That was beautiful and haunting, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, we really are all in this together, and despite the doom, it could give rise to bloom. Bill, yeah, we're a part of. I had to use it. It was right there. We're all part of creation of something beautiful. And in the words of Naima Penniman in this book entitled All We Can Save, effort gives way to existence. So hopefully through our shared efforts, all of us, we can give existence to the reality that children and the generations after us deserve. Now, Aji, on that note, as a member of the youth yourself, what role does the youth have to play, and what message or piece of advice do you have to give to all our young climate warriors?
For the youth, it's a hard one. I want to say that a lot of things that we'll say and that are said and that have to be said today about the situation we're in. A lot of the just real truths, like I'm not even being pessimistic or doomful. Like when we say like, no, like we are too late. Like it's not like like we're throwing in the towel and we're giving up because like, like it's getting hard now. Like, no, like we're at the point where it's a miracle. It's asking someone to move heaven and earth to get the world to kind of switch on the dime to change from this kind of unstoppable momentum that we have. But that you can't let that rule your life. The anger, the stress, the anxiety from the way the planet is going, from the way life is, from the increasing disparities, inequalities around the world, mostly economic. just that it's important to remember that we want that to inform our decisions, but not rule them. You know, we want that anger and that drive and that passion to inform what we do with our lives, but not to rule it. And that ultimately your life is yours, and that it's that it's more important to make sure that you're living your life to the best you can than it is to dive into attacking anybody. I think, like Bill said, like, don't make more enemies. And then to educate adults as much as possible. Like, if you have access to the information, have access to the science, have access to the knowledge, like a lot of our generation is really quite adept at navigating the internet, which is just a wealth of information. You know, we have the world at our fingertips. It's important to get that out into the community and to tell your peers that climate activism, there's like two ways to think about it. There's like the activism that everybody thinks about, which is like, oh, I'm an activist. It's a title, and it could be a job that you hold, maybe even, but it's like something that you do. And oftentimes we see it as like a separate or opposite, as going against the current in our current society. But I think oftentimes people overlook the fact that the biggest reason somebody is an activist is because they're active in their community, period. Like, regardless of whether or not they're active on the realms of climate change or social justice, what they are doing is they are in their community, talking to the people, trying to make their community better. And that if nothing else, that is something to remember, right? Like, that itself would make the world a better place. We were actively engaged in our communities and trying to make them better. However that comes about, that would be a better thing. And you know, that can start with making sure our parents are educated. And for adults, it's making sure you're open to education. Like, like you said, there is no time limit on learning new things. There's no time limit on learning new information. And you don't have to be an expert on things to act on them. You don't have to know the science intimately. I don't know the science intimately. You know, for starters, like, my extent of knowledge is there are greenhouse gases put in the air from burning fossil fuels, because I know that combustion reactions create carbon dioxide. I could never get in there and tell you the stoichiometry and figure out the math of like how much produces how much where. I know there's some big numbers included, you know, 1.2 trillion trees, kind of the buzz numbers. And I know that if we get policy in place, we allow the smart people who do have all the knowledge and intimate knowledge of that science to make those plans. So it's not on you to know intimately the science. You just have to know enough to act. You have to know what we need is a big percentage of reduction in carbon dioxide emissions every year, and we need to plant trees. You know, you just have to know just enough, I think. Educate yourself, and there's no time limit on that. So toss all that misconception out. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Aji. You're absolutely right in saying that it's not like we're too late is taking a cynical perspective. It's just grasping the reality of the situation that we're in, and it's important to channel our anger, like you said, at the situation to drive us to do better, including, like you mentioned, being more actively engaged in our community and helping each other learn about and understand the situation. So thank you. Those were pretty empowering words of wisdom that we can all learn from. And I think that really highlighted the intergenerational and intersectional responsibility that we have in this fight against climate change. So thank you. And with that, let's move on to our next question. How can we ensure that what awaits across the finish line is a better reality for everyone? Abby, once again, can you start us off with this one?
Let's see. I think when we change and make steps towards a different future, I think we can be really surprised along the way about how simple can be better. It just seems like we keep with progress, keep making things more complicated and more intense and fast. And I think just this process of really doing a self-reflection within the community of like, how are we going to live differently, and seeing what that would look like, and seeing what it looks like to let go of other things that you're not even thinking about doing, but that just that reevaluation, I think is going to be a really good thing.
Thanks, Abby. Absolutely. One of the shifts that we need to make is a paradigm shift as well. It's interesting that you brought up progress. I remember there was a meeting here a lot of years back between the sitting president at the time, and an indigenous community, and the indigenous leader said, we also want progress. It's just that our progress is our idea of progress is different from yours. To us, progress is the earth progressing, our community progressing, clean air, clean water. That is our idea. And you're absolutely right. We need to realize these things. But as what everyone has been saying throughout this discussion, we need to talk less. I should listen to that and listen more. These indigenous communities have been telling us for years. They've known all this time how we should have been living with respect with the Mother Earth and life. And it's a matter of including them, letting them lead in this fight as well. So thank you, Abby, for bringing that up. What about you, Bill? You said that change is inevitable, and it is. How can we be the authors of that change and not victims of what awaits us across the finish line?
That's the question. I think the listen more is good, and me talking less would be good. Could you actually ask the question again?
Right. The framing of this segment is, how can we ensure that what awaits us across the finish line is a better reality for all of us? How can we ensure that's a better reality?
How can we ensure it? I don't think we get any insurance. It's not ours to know that. Like Wendell Berry, if you ever get a chance to check out Wendell Berry, he's an amazing agricultural writer, poet, and I'm not going to quote him because I can't, but it's something like, it's not ours to know whether we win or not. It's our job. It's ours job to walk in the right way, like to be. Gosh, I'm really taking this apart. I'm not doing a good job with this quote, but it's really, we can't go into this conditionally. We go into this work because it is a reflection of who we are. So let's listen more to the indigenous folks, and let's find the resonance of what the wisdom there of how we live in a non-extractive way in our lives, to find that frequency, and to, in a way, sort of meditate on that frequency in our lives to amplify that. Let's find that frequency. Let's amplify it, and it's not ours to know how we win. It's ours to take the baton from the heroes of past generations, and to carry it forward to the next generation. This is not a conditional. Yes, winning is more fun, so we should be smart and strategic, and we, all that, but that can't be it. Like that, we have to. The world we're creating is going to be more beautiful, right? Even if all the shit is going going crazy around us, if we can focus on the relationships, if we can focus on things like you're doing, building this community-based infrastructure to We have to build those systems. We have to build the next system. So just freaking do the work and don't care about, and it's, you can't be about whether you succeed, because you're not going to succeed. You're not going to see the success. The timeline's too long, right? It's just got to resonate. I'm sorry to repeat myself. I'm starting to sound like an old person. All right. Check.
No, honestly, that was great. That was great. That's a good point. You brought a lot of good points. You know, that we can't ensure anything, and we just have to start just to get to work. And I love how you said it's a reflection of who we are. It's just part. It's simply a part of our identity. That's a great way to look at it. Actually, it's not just about winning a race, but it's about, you know, doing it because it's our identity, and it's a matter of, you know, we're all Earthlings and we need to do the work. So thank you for that.
Well, and I just want to add that there's this, you know, we shift policy. No, policy follows culture. I believe you shift culture and policy will shifts. If we don't shift culture, the policy thing is like, it's like an illusion. It can be dismantled as fast as it's set up. It's a house of cards unless we build the culture that can sustain and demand. It shifts our expectations of what's possible and what we demand. And sometimes also, it's not just like, oh, we're going to live right, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes we have to shut stuff down, and we have to stop, and we have to say, no, enough is enough. And I think that when we have a strong enough relationships where we can do that, like these climate strike ideas, I think that's very powerful, but that is built upon a foundation of relationships. So we also have to say no more, and we have to say no more in a way that I believe in the power of nonviolence. I understand that other tactics that people use, but I think there's something enrolling, like the fast that was referred to before, when someone takes on the challenges, takes on the risk, takes on the pain of something, and stands in the truth, that there's great transformative energy in that, and we need to do that together. We need to be heroic together.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I feel the same way. And yeah, policy should be about protecting culture. It should be about protecting society and helping people. And, you know, like Michael actually said in the film, right, how when it gets messed up, when protecting policies for protecting life gets messed up with protecting property, then I'm not quoting you verbatim, I'm sorry, but, you know, things end up really messed up. So yeah, thank you, Bill, for sharing your insights with that. And yeah, moving on to Michael, in the film, you said that we're well past the point of emergency in this race, and recognizing that, what can we still do to help create a better reality?
I think for me, lately, Roger Hallam is an inspiration, and Greta. And so I would encourage people particularly to just understand what Greta is trying to do. PBS, our public television channel here in the United States, did a 3-hour special on Greta called Greta, A Year to Change the World, where she took a year off school and she traveled to North America and back on a sailboat to try and talk to people around the world about climate, and to go to the UN talks, which moved back from Peru to Spain while she was over here. Anyway. So it's a good show. It's 3 hours long, all about her and her private thoughts and moments as she's going through this ordeal. And when she gets to the UN climate talks in Spain, they have her in the film saying, "I'm not going to make an emotional statement today, because every time I do, that's all you ever talk about. And so today I'm only going to share the science." And then the film cuts. And so the 2-minute talk that she gave, sharing the science, is not in the 3-hour special about Greta, A Year to Change the World. I want to encourage everybody listening to go to the Climate Reality Project training and to learn just enough of the science so that you can guarantee that the thing that you are working for is not a false solution, that you are not being bought off or greenwashed by corporate donors or whatever it is to pursue a false goal. We did it here in the U.S. with natural gas, which was supposed to be a bridge fuel to the future, a clean fuel that now we know is at least as dirty as coal, if not worse. So on and on and on. We're going to be sold false solutions because it's going to make people billionaires. So in order to make sure that the future we're working towards is better for everyone, you have to know just enough to understand what it is that you cannot accept, and then refuse to accept it. The other thing that's important around here for an old white guy like me, part of the problem is to shut up and listen and center voices of people who are actually struggling with these problems of inequality and climate pollution right now, to make sure that their needs are being put front and center. That's absolutely essential. And then to educate those communities. So I have enough information that I can sit down and work with and talk with and educate people in communities who still don't know that climate change is real or happening, or what it is that they need in order to protect their kids. So to me, it's all about combating that disinformation and having enough to know that you're on the right track. And then centering the voices of the people who are struggling with this problem now, which is why I think young people are essential, because you're looking at a future that has a much longer horizon than my future. So thank you for your work.
And thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. Aji, in the film, you talked about how the climate crisis presents us with a deadline. So what are your thoughts on how we can still work towards a better reality when it feels like we're running out of time?
Oh yeah, I'm unmuted. Well, I think first, it's not feels like we're running out of time. We are. I'm sorry. One more time the question, please.
Yes, the framing question for the segment is, how do we ensure that what awaits us across the finish line is a better reality? It has been pointed out that we can't ensure it, but that is, yeah.
I think it's a natural course of I'm going to tell a little story, and I think this answers the question. For the lawsuit, there was a moment there where we were prepared to go to trial in 2018 in October, and in order to prepare for trial, both sides of the lawsuit, both groups, our attorneys and the defendants, the U.S. government, are gathering all their evidence, and part of that is deposing anybody who's going on trial, going to be standing and testifying to the court. And a deposition is essentially just they sit you down in a room with a court reporter and a video camera, and the lawyers, the defending lawyers, or the lawyers, the other people's lawyers, will ask you questions about specific documents that they will have submitted for deposition prior. So it's a very formal. It's not like on the fly. It's not a crazy like asking questions coming out of left field process. But so I was deposed, and at the end of my deposition, like as I had gone through this like a decently long process of showing how everything in my complaint was talking about the government's responsibility for climate change, and that the government was, the cause, in part, for all the things that are impacting me today, from the for Seattle, really high heat waves that are cracking our interstates because of our interstates are buckling because the expansion of the concrete is too much because they're too hot, or the smoke that chokes out our airs and makes it a dangerous health hazard to go outside at all. And makes it even hard to be inside without extensive filtering and a lot of processing of your air. And at the very end, they asked me a question, which was if the federal government, the defendants acquiesced with the plea in this case, and the next day we turned around, and as a country, we were no longer producing fossil fuel emissions, but the rest of the world continued on a path towards destruction. Would we have remedied your case, right? And at first I was like, oh dang, like you're right, like climate change, and then I remembered that what we were suing for is not for climate change to stop, but for our government to stop violating our rights and by causing climate change. And that in the process of that, even if climate change as a whole isn't solved, even if the rest of the world isn't doing anything better, our life becomes better because we are moving in the right direction. And so it is, in its own way, not necessarily a guarantee, but a strong sense that if we move in the right direction, we'll get to the place we need to be, and it'll be good when we get there.
Wow, that was a great story, and honestly, I think that you really touched on the need to be able to act and to move towards the right direction, even without that guarantee. So, thank you, Aji, for sharing that. And I think, Danny, that was a great last note to end this segment. Why don't you start us off with the last part of our show?
Thank you, Chelsea. Wow. Honestly, talking to Abby, Bill, Michael, and Aji, I can do this all day. But unfortunately, it is nighttime and they're part of the world. So we're super duper grateful that they even spent this late night with us. This is turned into a late night show. But yes, thank you for making us feel incredibly empowered to take action. Now, right before we cross today's finish line, we have a little power up for all of our racers tuning in tonight, this afternoon, our part. The stories we tell ourselves matter and play a huge part in the climate movement, which has seen increasing demonstrations of artful activism. For example, Bill's kayaktivism and lights projection. At Climate Reality Philippines, we call this climartivism, which no Klimatotohanan episode would be complete without. Racers, the Climate Reality Project Philippines presents Muli.
Pakinggan ang halakhak ng mga bata sa dapit hapon kasabay ng huni ng ibong malaya. Tumayo, sumama ka sa aming paglalakbay, lumangoy sa hiwaga, iingatan ang ugnay, magtatanim ng munting awitin, sana ay maingin. Ikumpuni ang sirang bisikleta, pumadyak mong bagong umaga, tayo nang sumulong sa nagbabagong panahon, makibahagi muli.
So to learn more about the meaning behind the song and a little bit about how it was made, let's listen to a few words from the composer of Muli, Angela Era.
So Muli started in a Discord chat wherein we were thinking of a good title for Restory. And while looking for Filipino words related to restore, one of the climate reality leaders, Ivana, mentioned the word muli. But the group thought it's better to still include the word restore in the title. So we went with Restory, isang maikling kwento para sa Arbor Day 2021. But we couldn't let go of muli because, it was such a beautiful word. So another climate reality leader, Keith, casually said, I don't know, maybe he was kidding that time. He asked maybe there are songwriters in the group who could write a song about restoration and we can call it muli. I just finished sending my recording for the narration when I saw the exchange. And I'm not a professional songwriter, but I was still hyped from Restory, which was excellently written by Danny. So I said, maybe I can try. And then, what's the thought process behind it? I'm a very visual person. So I tried imagining an object that would capture the concept of restoration really well. And being in love with the Japanese word kintsugi, the art of putting back pieces of a broken pottery using gold, I went with a palayok and started writing from its perspective. When I read it, it seemed okay. But when I started singing it, it's like there's something wrong, but I can't point out what. So feeling frustrated and wanting to continue while I'm feeling that way, I maximized social media and asked for tips or insights in my IG story. And then my cousin Ate Kate asked who I am writing to, and perhaps thinking about this will help shift my perspective. So yeah, I tried making it more personal. And then the imagery suddenly changed. It's not a palayok anymore. I pictured my rusty old bike that was repaired and I still use. So I started writing, and then after I finished, I recorded and sent a demo, and then very creative and talented climate reality leaders started giving harmonies, playing instruments, and Nate arranged it beautifully and he played the violin. And Jake from Audistry produced it. It sounded amazing. And then Jeka, Jolina, and Ivana did the animation, which was so magical. So really, it was a collaborative effort. Muli is our baby. It's our song. Muli really is a song about restoration, both external and internal, and influenced by the Japanese word kintsugi. It's about recognizing where we are now, including the damages, and acknowledging that we can still have something so beautiful out of it if we do something. So, it requires action. We can't say, this planet is broken and dirty, it's hopeless. I can't wait to transfer to Mars. Although that's possible, we shouldn't think that way. It's so unfair and selfish. Also, something to consider. Just because you have not been active or well informed on the actions against climate crisis, or you took a long break, it doesn't mean you can't take part now. So no matter how old or young we are, we can always do something. And intergenerational partnership and action is key in solving problems like the climate crisis. It's everyone's accountability. It's everyone's responsibility. Muli reminds us to give this planet and our souls to the chance to reveal and surprise and amaze us just how beautiful they are. It's it's a love song of climate reality leaders to anyone who's willing to listen, and hopefully it will create ripples. Cliche, but may it be like a seed planted in people's hearts that would be nurtured and eventually would grow. Aristotle said that music directly represents the passions of the soul. And if one listens to the wrong kind of music, they will become the wrong kind of person. So deep and true and scary, right? This tells us how powerful music is. Not only can it reflect how we are feeling as we translate them into words and melody, but it can also affect how people are feeling and thinking. So sometimes, right, we feel like a song we can relate to is somewhat written for us or it's about us, even though we've never really met the composer in person. And there are times when you're feeling blue and you listen to really sad songs and you find yourself in an even darker place or listen to a song that's gonna hype you up or a song that's relaxing or something that's therapeutic that could in a way help you embrace that vulnerability, recognize and accept the realities, and also help you heal slowly. Yeah, so music is the universal language. It exists in every culture and civilization. Through songs, human experiences were preserved and passed on. And music sets the tone in films. It is played during, before, and after games to energize players and the crowd. And music played an important role in social movements. So why not in climate activism as well, right? So yeah, music reflects and could create social conditions. It can inspire social change. I mean, it is not the answer, but a tool that we could use to forward our advocacies and to spark action. Because music can affect a person and that person's worldview. It could shape people. And people are consumers of music. Music is even used as a tool to sell, right? So let's sell the message of how important it is for humanity to step up now, particularly on climate action. And yeah, we have to be mindful of what kind of messages we're trying to get across, such as there's still hope and we can still do something about it together. We have to rethink how we can shift from sustainability to restoration and then regeneration. And we need everyone, the government, the business sector, civil society, the academic and scientific institutions, communities, individuals, mothers, fathers, grandparents, children and youth, everyone. Makibahagi muli.
And that takes us across the finish line. Thank you so much, Jel, and to our incredible speakers. We cannot thank you enough for being with us here today in today's episode of Klimatotohanan. Now, to close the show, the final parting question is, what is your vision of a better reality and what motivates you to keep running to it? Let's start with let's start with Bill because he's on the road and spending his last 2% of battery life on us. Take it away, Bill. Oh, okay, Bill had to go. Let's go. Oh, there we go. He turned on the light. Very kind.
Yeah, I have to keep opening and closing the van door because it keeps shutting off the light automatically. All right, so I'm not going to make you repeat the question. I think the only thing we can do is love more and fear less. And I don't know. I think you all are just such an inspiration, And the fact that you invite us into this journey with you together, that means so much to me. And that's what I want to do. I want to be in this with you all. And so thank you so much. I'm just gratitude and love and so much respect to everybody. And it was so good to hear the words from all of my friends who continue to amaze me and just lift me up. I just really love you all, and it's just so great to hear you, and I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Aji a while ago was talking about burnout, and these past 2 hours of conversation with you has really boosted my hopes and my spirits and my energy up and has propelled me in this race. So thank you so much again, Bill, for joining us. If you need to conserve the last percentage of your battery, please stay safe on the road. It's a long drive home. Thank you again. Yes, bye, Bill.
Bye, Bill. Thank you so much. Take care and drive safe. All right.
Right. Yep. So we could then go to Abby for her parting message.
Definitely what it resonates with me is just protecting what we love. And I think when you realize or fear that you're going to lose something, you cherish it on a different level. And so just taking walks and noticing, I notice when I take walks, I'm taking like detailed photos of just like a part of a flower or a curled up dried leaf and the patterns that you see. And so I'm just noticing and appreciating the smallest of small things and appreciating every day and mindful of every relationship. And so I just feel more alert and awake and connected. I think as coronavirus has slowed our world, there's also been something really sacred and special in the struggle. And I think that's what's happening also. As we feel like we're losing things, we cherish them more.
Right, thank you, Abby, and we appreciate you. So thank you so much for that parting message. Michael, how about you? What's your parting message?
A vision would be to imagine how I'm going to get water and how I'm going to breathe clean air and how I'm going to find food. And then everything else becomes optional. So it's almost a kind of a Buddhist thing or a no thing, nothing. The idea that what David Suzuki often says is, that there are things that we cannot compromise, we cannot change or alter the air, the chemical composition of air and water and land and these facts in physics that are not subject to any of our actions or policies. And yet we've invented economy and money and currency and all kinds of systems that are setting out to alter and destroy those physical things we rely on. So the vision for me is to flip that so that we're not putting money or anything else except what we absolutely need above a living home, so that I know what I need. And what's funny about it is that I become free. If all the things that I don't need, all the things that I'm being sold that I don't have to have anymore, I'm free. So that's kind of my vision, is that hopefully people will find the beauty and the joy in getting free. Or else somebody with a gun is going to come and take all your stuff away from you. So whatever.
Right. Thanks, Bill. There's this documentary about minimalism. I believe it's on Netflix. They always say, use love people and use things because the other way around never works. So
That's beautiful.
we need to
Yeah.
fall out of love with things. And
Yeah.
there's this one final quote that Michael just reminded me of, and Abby and Bill and Aji, before I pass on the baton to Aji. It's from, of course, it's from Marvel. It's from Peggy Carter. She said, "Compromise where you can, where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye, and say, no, you move." So thanks. It's something that Michael, Abby, and Bill and Aji have brought up today. Really reminded me of that. And now we pass the final baton of this power relay to Aji to close the show. Take it away.
I think that's hilarious that that's a Marvel quote. That's
That's
my
okay. Very consumed.
if I want to leave with anybody, if I want to leave anybody with something this morning for the Philippines, or whenever it's viewed at all, I think it's the idea that as long as you keep moving in the right direction, as fast as you can, just like with as much conviction and purpose as you can. There we go. Move in the right direction with as much conviction and purpose as you can, and you're pretty much doing the best. This dog. Okay, come say hi to the camera. But yeah, that, just like in the situation where what we're suing the government for is not to stop climate change, but to make our community better by stopping the violation of our rights. That as long as we are moving in that direction with conviction, as long as rights stop being violated, the consequence of those actions is that we find ourselves in a world that is free from climate change. And so I think move in the proper direction with conviction is what I want to leave people with. Don't get hung up on the small shit. Don't or the big stuff. Don't worry about like what the rest of the world is doing. Move in the proper direction with conviction.
Right. Thank you so much, Aji. And even though we're finishing up here, I think that this is a great start to moving in the right direction. And I'm so thankful for all of you guys. And so thank you so much to all of you for joining us, to our guests for joining us, and for those who are watching now on Facebook, for Power Relay Race to a Better Reality. I just want to say, more importantly, thank you to all of you for all the work that you do to help ensure a more sustainable planet for all generations, for all time, always. Hopefully, we will all meet again to continue our conversation and collaborate for climate action.
Truly, Chelsea, our speakers today show us that we all have a role to play. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are in life, or what you do in this race, there is space for you. Truthfully, it's code red for the planet and for humanity, and so we need you. It's a tight race to stay below 1.5 degrees as is needed, but together and only together, we can finish it and finish strong. So join us.
And to learn more about how you can do that, you can visit the Instagram page of the Climate Reality Project Philippines at Climate Reality PH and our Twitter account at Climate Real PH. You can also visit the socials of our guests' organizations, and their handles are here flashed on the screen. This has been Power Relay Race to a Better Reality for Klimatotohanan, a fortnightly webcast organized and led by our climate reality leaders to tackle the urgent climate issues of today and tomorrow. Why Klimatotohanan? Because we need real talk and real action on the climate crisis. So thank you once again for tuning in, and see you again in our next episode.
These are ordinary people that haven't been arrested before. None of us had been arrested before. I did then end up saying to my husband and my daughter that I might be in jail. For a mother to go to jail, that is what it's going to take to make a difference.
I got to shut off 590,000 barrels of tar sands filled with toxic chemicals. I knew that when I cut that chain and I opened that fence, that I was crossing a threshold that I couldn't uncross. I had made a choice to go into another part of my life and that I wasn't going to be able to step back from that.
There's enormous pressure on us because we cannot lose this case.
I have one last stab at this, and I am gonna try and take it with all my might.
Back and fuse have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Back and fuse have got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
There's this moment when you have to step out of this threshold of your own comfort and take a risk. They bring this beast, this monster, into the beautiful Salish Sea, and we get to fight them with kayaks. And all of a sudden, we had this incredible battle where we were winning because we were winning the moral fight. The whole world was cheering for us. Once you join the battle, you're in the battle. You know, then you're in.